Ezekiel Thornfield wanted a cook, but when he stepped onto his porch that dawn with rifle in hand, he found a black girl with no shoes and bruises covering her dark skin like storm clouds across summer sky. She clutched his torn notice in bloodied fingers. Dust rose on the horizon, riders coming hard. The woman lifted her head, split lip, swollen eye that barely opened. Something fierce burned behind the pain. "I can cook." Her voice carried strength that didn't match her broken state. Zeke's finger found the trigger guard. His daughter Emma's face appeared in the window behind him, small hands pressed against glass. "They're coming," the woman whispered. The dust clouds grew larger, 3 horses, maybe 4. Zeke counted heartbeats against his ribs. Emma had been asking for biscuits like Mama used to make. Been asking for 2 years now. He stepped aside. The woman stumbled through his door and immediately moved toward the kitchen. No hesitation, no gratitude, just purpose flowing through her like water finding its course. Zeke barred the door and watched her light the stove with shaking hands. Blood dotted her torn dress. Her feet left red prints on his clean floor. Emma crept down the stairs in her nightgown. "Papa, stay back, little bird." But the woman was already working. Flour from his nearly empty bin, eggs from yesterday's gathering. Her movements grew steady despite the tremor in her shoulders. The riders thundered past without stopping. Hoofbeats faded into morning silence. Zeke lowered his rifle. "What's your name?" "Sierra." She didn't offer more, neither did he ask. The kitchen filled with smells that brought memories flooding back. His wife Sarah's hands kneading dough. Emma giggling over sticky fingers. Mornings when the world felt whole instead of cracked down the middle. Sierra worked like she belonged there, like she understood the weight of empty chairs and silent breakfasts. She moved around his kitchen with careful respect, touching nothing unnecessary, wasting nothing precious. Emma edged closer. "Are you an angel? Just a woman who can cook?" But when Sierra set the plate before them, Zeke tasted something beyond mere food. Hope maybe, or just the memory of what hope used to feel like. Emma devoured her portion. First time in months she'd cleaned her plate without coaxing. First time she'd smiled that wide since the fever took her mother. "Angel lady," Emma declared. Sierra's swollen face almost managed a smile. Almost. Zeke studied this stranger who'd brought light back to his daughter's eyes. Sierra's hands showed calluses that spoke of hard work. Her posture held dignity that bruises couldn't break, but questions burned in his throat. Who beat her? Why was she running? What kind of trouble followed behind those dust clouds? "You can rest in the barn," he said finally. "I'll earn my keep." "Didn't say you wouldn't." Sierra began clearing dishes with movements that spoke of practice, of service, of knowing her place in a world that gave women like her few choices about where that place might be. Emma watched her with fascination. "Will you teach me to make biscuits? If your papa allows it." Zeke felt something shift in his chest, some locked door creaking open after years of rust and neglect. Emma needed more than his clumsy attempts at fatherhood, needed things he couldn't provide no matter how hard he tried. "We'll see," he said. The morning passed in careful silence. Sierra tended her wounds with supplies from his medicine box. Emma helped with small tasks, chattering about chickens and wildflowers while Sierra listened with attention that felt precious. Zeke watched from the doorway, watched his broken home slowly remember what wholeness might feel like. But trouble had a way of following wounded things. His neighbors wouldn't understand. The law might not care about the difference between right and wrong, and somewhere out there riders might circle back. Still, when Sierra asked about staying until her feet healed, Zeke found himself nodding. Emma clapped her hands. "The angel lady is staying." Just until her feet healed, Zeke told himself. Just until the immediate danger passed. But something in Sierra's eyes suggested she understood the weight of temporary promises. Understood how quickly sanctuary could become prison, how easily kindness could turn to expectation. She asked for nothing beyond basic shelter, offered everything she had in return. For now, that seemed like enough. The afternoon sun slanted through kitchen windows, casting long shadows across worn floorboards. Emma curled up for her nap with contentment Zeke hadn't seen in months. Sierra sat by the window, watching the horizon where those riders had disappeared. Her hands folded carefully in her lap, her body held ready despite exhaustion, still running even while sitting still. Zeke cleaned his rifle and wondered what he'd invited into his carefully ordered world, wondered if kindness was worth the risk it always seemed to bring. Outside, wind stirred the dust where hoofprints marked the earth. Inside, his home felt alive again for the first time since Sarah died. Sometimes a man had to choose between safety and doing right. Sometimes those choices got made in heartbeats, with rifle in hand and strangers bleeding on the porch. Zeke had made his choice. Now he'd live with whatever came riding back. Sheriff Jeremiah Bass arrived 3 days later with dust on his badge and questions in his weathered face. His horse stamped impatiently while he studied the horizon where tracks still marked the earth. Zeke stepped onto the porch, rifle within reach but not in hand. "Heard you might have seen someone pass through," Bass said. "Runaway property, young woman, dangerous." Sierra pressed herself against the kitchen wall inside. Her breathing went shallow. Emma sat at the table, coloring with careful concentration. "Haven't seen anyone," Zeke said. The lie tasted bitter on his tongue. First time he'd lied to the law. First time he'd chosen sides against everything he'd been raised to believe about order and authority. Bass's eyes swept the yard, took in the swept porch, the smell of fresh bread drifting from the kitchen, the small changes that spoke of a woman's presence. Man who owns her is offering good money. Real good money for her return. "Like I said, haven't seen anyone," Bass nodded slowly. His gaze lingered on the kitchen window where a shadow moved just out of sight. "Well, you see anything, you let me know." He wheeled his horse around and rode toward town. Dust settled in his wake like judgment deferred. Inside, Sierra's hands gripped the windowsill. Her knuckles had gone pale against dark skin. Emma looked up from her coloring with confused eyes. "Why was Papa talking strange?" Sierra knelt beside the girl. "Sometimes grown folks have to say things they don't want to say. Like when I tell Papa my stomach doesn't hurt when it does. Something like that." Zeke came inside and found them there. Woman and child bent over crayons and paper. The picture showed a house with 3 figures standing in front, family drawn in a child's hopeful imagination. "You need to tell me," Zeke said. "All of it." Sierra's shoulders straightened. She'd known this moment would come. Known kindness always demanded its price in truth. "His name is Cornelius Whitmore. Owns land down in Texas. Kept me working his kitchen after the war ended. Said I owed him for food and shelter. Said the debt kept growing no matter how hard I worked." The words came slow and measured, each one a stone dropped into still water. "How much debt?" $2,000, maybe more now." Zeke's jaw tightened. $2,000. More money than most men saw in 5 years. Enough to buy his ranch twice over. "That's not legal. Legal and right don't always shake hands." She spoke truth that settled heavy in his chest. Truth about a world where laws bent different ways for different people, where freedom came with conditions that looked suspiciously like chains. Emma colored another figure into her picture. This one wore a dress and had long dark hair. The days that followed brought rhythm. Sierra rose before dawn to start breakfast. Emma helped gather eggs and learned to knead dough without making flour clouds that covered the kitchen. Zeke found excuses to linger over coffee and watch the easy way they moved around each other. Sierra's bruises faded from purple to yellow to gone. Her feet healed enough for the boots Zeke bought in town. She never asked for them, just found them by her bed one morning and wore them without comment. The ranch work went easier with her help. She could gentle a spooked horse with patience that spoke of understanding frightened things. Could mend tears in clothing and harness with stitches so neat they looked deliberate. Emma laughed again. Real laughter that bubbled up from deep places and filled the house with music Zeke had forgotten existed. But neighbors talked. Tom Brennan mentioned the smoke rising from Zeke's chimney at odd hours. Mrs. Henderson from the Mercantile asked pointed questions about his sudden need for women's clothing sizes. The talk spread through town like ripples in pond water. Speculation grew with each telling. Zeke felt eyes on him when he rode to town, conversations that stopped when he entered the mercantile, nods that carried judgment instead of greeting. "You're taking risks," neighbor Frank Morrison said one afternoon. They stood by the fence line between their properties, watching cattle graze on land that stretched toward mountains. "Not sure what you mean." "Sure you do. Town's talking. About your house guest." Morrison's words carried warning wrapped in neighborly concern, the kind of warning that came before ultimatums. "Free country," Zeke said. "Free for some. Dangerous for others who harbor the wrong kind of guests." The threat sat between them, unspoken but clear. Morrison rode away without looking back. That evening, Sierra taught Emma to read from the Bible. Her voice shaped words with education that surprised Zeke. Not just kitchen learning, real schooling that spoke of a past more complicated than simple servitude. "Where did you learn that?" he asked after Emma went to bed. "Here and there." Always the careful answers, always holding something back. But in quiet moments between chores, Zeke caught glimpses of the woman behind the caution. The way she hummed while cooking, how she saved vegetable scraps for birds, the gentle way she corrected Emma's grammar without making the girl feel small. She read better than most men he knew, wrote with careful penmanship, spoke with precision that suggested learning beyond what most servants received. Questions multiplied in the silence between them. Questions about her education, about the family that might have taught her to read, about the man who claimed to own someone so clearly meant for better things. But some questions felt too sharp for the fragile peace they'd built. Some truths might shatter the careful balance that kept them all safe. Wind rattled the windows that night. Sierra sat by the dying fire, mending one of Emma's dresses. Her needle caught firelight as it moved through fabric with practiced efficiency. Zeke watched from the doorway, watched the way shadows played across her face, the way her presence had transformed his house from shelter back into home. 3 people learning to trust again, learning to hope for things that might be impossible. Outside, coyotes called across the darkness. Their voices carried warnings about the dangers of wanting too much, of building something beautiful on borrowed time. Cornelius Whitmore arrived on a Tuesday morning when the sky hung gray with storm clouds. 3 men rode with him. All carried the lazy confidence of those who'd never been told no. Zeke was mending fence when he spotted them cresting the ridge. Their horses moved with purpose that made his stomach clench. He dropped his tools and headed for the house. Sierra stood at the kitchen window. Her face had gone pale as winter sky. "Take Emma upstairs," Zeke said. "Papa." Emma looked between them with growing worry. "Go with Sierra. Stay quiet." Sierra's hand found Emma's shoulder. They disappeared up the narrow stairs just as hoofbeats thundered into the yard. Zeke stepped onto his porch. Rifle leaned against the doorframe within easy reach. Whitmore dismounted with the careful movements of a man who considered himself important. Expensive suit, clean boots, hands that had never known real work. "Mr. Thornfield, I believe you have something that belongs to me." His voice carried authority backed by law and custom, the certainty of a man who'd never had his claims questioned. "Don't think I do," Whitmore smiled. The expression held no warmth. He reached into his jacket and withdrew folded papers. "Legal documents, signed and witnessed. My property Serafina owes substantial debt for care provided after emancipation. Room and board, medical expenses, education costs." The papers crackled in the morning air. Official seals caught what little light broke through the clouds. $2,000 and growing. She's legally bound to work off this debt under territorial law. Zeke's jaw worked. $2,000, the exact amount Sierra had mentioned. Legal theft dressed up in proper documentation. "I'll pay it." "I'm afraid that's not acceptable. The debt belongs to her. She must work it off personally. It's a matter of principle." Principle. The word tasted bitter as medicine. What kind of principle keeps a free woman in bondage? The kind that maintains order. She ran away from legal obligation. That sets a dangerous precedent for others who might get similar ideas. Whitmore's men shifted in their saddles. Hands drifted toward weapon grips. The threat sat unspoken but clear in the space between them. "I'm a reasonable man, Mr. Thornfield. You have 48 hours to produce my property. After that, federal marshals will handle the matter." The words hit Zeke's chest like hammer blows. Federal marshals. Legal authority he couldn't fight with rifle or good intentions. And if she's not here, then you'll face charges for harboring stolen property. Your daughter would need new arrangements. Emma. They'd use his daughter against him. Target the one thing that could break his resolve completely. Whitmore remounted his horse with practiced ease. 48 hours, Mr. Thornfield. I trust you'll make the right choice." They rode away, leaving dust and dread in equal measure. Sierra came downstairs when the hoofbeats faded. Emma clung to her hand with white knuckles. "I have to go," Sierra said. "No. You heard him. They'll take Emma. They'll destroy everything you've built here." Zeke turned from the window where he'd been watching dust settle on the horizon. Sierra stood straight-backed in his kitchen, ready to sacrifice herself for people she'd known 3 weeks. "I won't let that happen. You can't stop federal marshals." "Maybe not, but I can try." Something passed between them then. Understanding that went deeper than words. Recognition of the choice they both faced. Emma tugged on Sierra's dress. "Are you leaving?" Sierra knelt to meet the girl's eyes. "I don't want to." "Then don't." Child's logic. Simple and clean in a world that dealt in complications. That afternoon, neighbors arrived. Not to help, to make their position clear. Frank Morrison, Tom Brennan, 3 others whose names Zeke had known since childhood. Men he'd worked beside during harvest seasons and hard winters. They sat their horses in his yard with faces carved from stone. "Time to be reasonable, Zeke," Morrison said. "Reasonable about what?" "About not bringing federal attention to our community, about not harboring fugitives, about remembering where your loyalties should lie." The words hung heavy as storm clouds. Ultimatum delivered in neighborly tones. "She's not a fugitive, she's a free woman." "Free woman with legal debts," Brennan added. "Papers say she belongs to Whitmore until those debts are settled." Papers can lie. Papers backed by federal law don't. They made their point and left. But the message echoed in their wake. Stand alone or face consequences that reached beyond his property lines. That evening, Sierra cooked supper with extra care. Every movement precise. Every dish perfect. Last meal prepared with love instead of obligation. Emma chattered about lessons and wildflowers and plans for tomorrow, innocent of the storm gathering around them. Zeke watched Sierra work, noted the way her hands moved with practiced grace, the careful attention she paid to Emma's favorite foods, the quiet dignity she maintained while facing exile. After Emma went to bed, they sat by the fire, not speaking, just existing in the space between decision and consequence. "Tell me about your family," Zeke said finally. Sierra's hand stilled on the mending in her lap. "What family?" "The one that taught you to read. To write with penmanship better than most teachers, to speak with education that goes beyond kitchen work." Her needle caught firelight, silver thread through dark fabric. "Some stories are better left buried." Maybe, but some stories might change everything. The fire crackled. Wind rattled windows. Outside, storm clouds gathered strength for whatever weather morning might bring. Sierra set down her mending, looked into flames that danced with secrets and possibility. "My father's name was James Blackwood." The words dropped into silence like stones into deep water, creating ripples that might reach shores neither of them could see. Emma's fever came with the dawn. Zeke found her burning like a coal in her small bed. Her skin felt hot enough to scorch his palm. Her breathing came shallow and quick. "Sierra," he called. She appeared in the doorway, still tying her robe. One look at Emma and her face went sharp with focus. "How long has she been like this?" "Just found her." Sierra pressed her hand to Emma's forehead. The child's eyes fluttered but didn't open. Her lips had gone pale as winter sky. "We need cool water, clean cloths, willow bark if you have it." Zeke had never heard that tone from her before. Command wrapped in calm certainty. the voice of someone who'd faced this enemy and won. He brought what she asked for and watched her work. Sierra's hands moved with practiced precision. She mixed powders from his medicine box into combinations he'd never considered, measured doses with the confidence of real training. "Where did you learn this?" "My father's plantation had a doctor, French man named Beaumont. He taught me." She bathed Emma's burning skin with methodical care, spooned medicine between dry lips, spoke soft words that soothed even when the child couldn't hear them. Hours passed. Emma's fever climbed higher. Her small body shook with chills that no amount of blankets could warm. Zeke paced the kitchen while Sierra maintained her vigil upstairs. Outside, storm clouds that had threatened for days finally opened. Rain drummed against windows with increasing fury. The 48-hour deadline meant nothing now. Whitmore and his threats felt distant as yesterday's weather. Only Emma mattered, only keeping his daughter tethered to this world when fever tried to drag her away. Sierra came downstairs near midnight. Exhaustion lined her face, but her eyes held steady purpose. "The fever's breaking. She's asking for water." Relief hit Zeke's chest harder than any physical blow. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time and found Emma awake, weak but aware. "Papa," her voice barely carried across the small room, but it was there, real and present and alive. "Right here, little bird." Emma's eyes found Sierra standing in the doorway. "Angel lady saved me." "She did." Sierra brought broth and sat beside the bed while Emma managed small sips. Her presence calmed the girl in ways Zeke's worried hovering couldn't match. "Don't go," Emma whispered. "I'm right here. Promise?" Sierra's eyes met Zeke's across the bed. The weight of impossible promises hung between them. "I promise I'll try." Emma slept peacefully for the first time in days. Her breathing came steady and deep. Color returned to cheeks that had been pale as death only hours before. Zeke and Sierra sat in the kitchen, while rain continued its assault on the windows. Neither spoke about tomorrow's deadline. Neither mentioned Whitmore's threats or the federal marshals who might arrive with sunrise. "You saved her life," Zeke said finally. "Just did what needed doing." Most people wouldn't have known what needed doing. Sierra's hands wrapped around her coffee cup. Steam rose between them, carrying the bitter comfort of shared vigil. Dr. Beaumont said healing was about watching and listening, understanding what the body was trying to say. "He taught you well. He was a good man. Tried to teach anyone willing to learn. Said knowledge belonged to whoever could use it properly." More pieces of her puzzle falling into place. Education that went beyond reading and writing. Medical training that saved his daughter's life. Background that suggested privilege alongside bondage. "Your father allowed this." "My father encouraged it, said his daughter deserved the same opportunities as any white child." The word hung between them. Daughter, not servant, not property. Daughter of a man wealthy enough to employ French doctors and progressive enough to educate a child regardless of color. What happened to him? Died 5 years ago. Whitmore was his business partner. Handled the legal affairs after the funeral. Understanding began to dawn, pieces connecting in patterns that made Zeke's blood run cold. "He stole your inheritance." More than that, he stole my identity. Destroyed the papers that proved who I was. Made me into property instead of heir. Rain lashed the windows with increasing violence. The storm outside matched the fury building in Zeke's chest. Fury at laws that allowed such theft. At men who used legal words to dress up their crimes. How much were you supposed to inherit? Half of everything. The plantation, the businesses, all of it. Not just a few $1,000s. A fortune built on land and cotton and years of accumulated wealth. Enough to buy freedom for hundreds of people trapped in similar circumstances. Emma stirred in her sleep upstairs. They both turned toward the sound, ears tuned to any sign of returning fever. "She's going to be fine," Sierra said softly. "Because of you. Because she's strong, like her father." Something in her voice made Zeke look up from his coffee. Sierra was watching him with eyes that held more than gratitude, more than friendship born of shared crisis. "Sierra, I know it's impossible. "Know the world doesn't allow for people like us to choose our own happiness." The words hung between them like bridge planks across impossible distance. Truth spoken in the space between storm and shelter. "The world's been wrong about a lot of things." Her smile was small but real, the first completely unguarded expression he'd seen from her. "Emma needs a mother who stays by choice, not by circumstance." "And what do you need?" "To matter to someone, to build something lasting instead of just surviving day to day." Lightning split the sky outside. Thunder followed close behind, shaking the house on its foundation. They sat in the aftermath of honesty. Two broken people admitting they might be stronger together than apart. Upstairs, Emma called out in her sleep. Not fever dreams this time. Just the soft murmur of a child who felt safe enough to rest completely. Morning would bring impossible choices. Federal marshals and legal documents and neighbors who'd chosen sides against them. But in this moment, surrounded by storm and threat and uncertainty, they'd found something worth fighting for. Sierra reached across the table. Her fingers brushed his hand with touch that felt like covenant. Outside, rain continued washing the earth clean. Inside, three people learned that love could grow even in the hardest ground. Sheriff Bass returned the next morning while Emma still slept recovering from her fever. He dismounted with purpose that made Zeke's hand drift toward his rifle, but Bass raised both hands in gesture of peace. "Need to talk, all of us." Something in his voice had changed. The official authority was gone. What remained sounded more personal, more urgent. Sierra emerged from the kitchen where she'd been preparing breakfast. Her posture went rigid at the sight of the lawman who'd come looking for her before. "It's all right," Bass said. "I'm not here to arrest anyone." Zeke studied the sheriff's weathered face, searching for signs of deception or trap, finding only weariness that spoke of sleepless nights and difficult decisions. "What do you want?" "To stop Cornelius Whitmore from destroying more lives." The words hung in the morning air between them, confession wrapped in determination. Bass removed his hat and ran fingers through gray hair that had thinned over years of keeping peace in hard country. "My sister died 3 years ago, down in Arkansas. Debt bondage to a man just like Whitmore. Worked herself to death trying to pay off debts that kept growing no matter how hard she tried." His voice carried pain that time hadn't softened. Raw grief channeled into purpose. "Been tracking Whitmore ever since, gathering evidence, building a case that might actually stick in federal court." Sierra's hands gripped the porch railing. "Why should we trust you?" "Because I need your testimony to make it work. Need someone willing to stand up in court and tell the truth about what he's done." The morning sun climbed higher, burning off the mist that clung to the valleys. Clear sky emerging after the storm. "You're asking her to risk everything," Zeke said. "I'm offering her the chance to stop him, permanently." Bass reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a thick folder. Papers bound with string and sealed with official stamps. Testimonies from 12 other women, all kept in bondage through fake debts, all too scared to speak publicly because Whitmore has money and influence. He set the folder on the porch rail where morning light caught the official seals. "But you're different, Miss Blackwood. You have something he can't buy or threaten away." Sierra's breath caught. "How do you know that name?" "Because I've been investigating your father's death. James Blackwood didn't die of natural causes. He was poisoned. Whitmore needed him gone to steal everything he'd built." The words hit the air like thunderclaps. Murder dressed up as illness. Theft made possible by assassination. Sierra's knees buckled. Zeke caught her arm, steadied her against the weight of truth she'd suspected but never dared voice. "You have proof." Medical records from Dr. Beaumont. He suspected poisoning but couldn't prove it at the time. Kept detailed notes about symptoms that matched arsenic administration. Bass opened the folder and withdrew yellowed papers covered in precise handwriting. Medical observations that painted pictures of slow death by deliberate design. "Your father left a will, proper legal document naming you as his heir and daughter. Beaumont helped hide copies before Whitmore could destroy them all." Hope and horror warred in Sierra's expression. Justice within reach but purchased with danger that could cost them everything. What would testifying mean? Federal trial in Denver. Your word against his lawyers and bought witnesses. Risk of retaliation if the case fails. And if I don't, he keeps destroying lives. Your inheritance stays stolen. Other women stay trapped in bondage that should have ended with the war. Emma appeared in the doorway, drawn by voices but still weak from fever. She leaned against the doorframe with curious eyes that took in the serious faces around her. What's happening? Sierra knelt beside the girl and smoothed hair away from her still pale face. Grown folks are talking about how to make bad people stop hurting good people. Like in the stories, where the hero fights the dragon. Something like that. Emma nodded with the solemn, understanding children brought to complex adult problems. Heroes have to be brave even when they're scared. Wisdom from an 8-year-old mouth. Truth that cut through legal complications and adult fears. Bass gathered his papers and prepared to leave. I'll need an answer by tomorrow. Federal marshals will be here soon, and I need to know whose side you're choosing. After he rode away, they sat in kitchen chairs that suddenly felt too small for the weight of decision pressing down on them. It could work, Zeke said finally. Or it could get us all killed. Some things are worth the risk. Sierra looked toward the stairs where Emma had gone back to rest. Easy to say when it's not your daughter facing the consequences. She is my daughter. In every way that matters. The words hung between them. Commitment deeper than marriage vows or legal documents. Choice made not from desperation but from love. If we do this, there's no going back. Win or lose, everything changes. Everything already changed the morning you showed up on my porch. That afternoon, they walked the property boundaries while Emma napped, checking fence lines and water sources. Ordinary ranching tasks that felt weighted with goodbye. Sierra studied the mountains that rose beyond the valley, snow-capped peaks that promised permanence in a world built on shifting ground. I never thought I'd have a real home again, she said. This will always be your home, no matter what happens in Denver. Promise me something. If the trial goes wrong, if they convict me instead of him, promise you'll take care of Emma, give her the childhood she deserves. Zeke stopped walking, turned to face her completely. Promise me you'll come back. Both of us need you here. Wind stirred the grass around them, carried sense of approaching autumn and change that couldn't be stopped. I promise I'll try. That evening, they sent word to Bass. 3 words that committed them to truth regardless of cost. We'll do it. Whitmore arrived at dawn with federal marshals and certainty written across his face. 4 riders this time. Official badges catching early sunlight like warning signals. Zeke stepped onto his porch. Sierra stood beside him. No hiding this morning. No running from what had to be faced. Emma pressed her small face against the kitchen window. Still weak from fever but determined to witness whatever came next. Mr. Thornfield, the lead marshal said, we're here for the woman Serafina. Legal documents require her immediate return. His voice carried federal authority, the kind that brooked no argument from local ranchers with local concerns. But Sheriff Bass rode into the yard before anyone could move. His horse kicked up dust that settled between the opposing forces. Actually, Marshal Davidson, there's been a development. Bass dismounted with deliberate calm, reached into his saddlebag and withdrew an official folder thick with papers and seals. Federal warrant for the arrest of Cornelius Whitmore. Charges include fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit murder. Whitmore's face went pale as winter sky. This is preposterous. I have legal documents. Forged documents. We have the originals. Sierra stepped forward. Her voice carried strength that surprised everyone, including herself. My name is Serafina Blackwood, daughter of James Blackwood, legal heir to half of everything this man has stolen. The words hung in morning air like judgment finally delivered. Truth spoken without fear or apology. Bass handed papers to Marshal Davidson. Medical records proving James Blackwood was murdered. Will and testament naming his daughter as heir. Testimony from Dr. Beaumont documenting the poisoning. Davidson studied the documents with growing recognition. Federal evidence that couldn't be dismissed or bought. Cornelius Whitmore, you're under arrest. The marshals moved with practiced efficiency. Shackles clicked around wrists that had never expected to feel such restraint. Whitmore's carefully constructed world crumbled in minutes. Years of theft and legal manipulation undone by truth that refused to stay buried. You can't prove anything, he said. Already did. Bass pulled out one final document. James Blackwood's will in the original handwriting. Legal proof that made Sierra's inheritance undeniable. The federal marshals rode away with their prisoner. Dust settled in their wake, leaving silence that felt deeper than peace. Sierra stared at the papers in her hands. Official documents that transformed her from fugitive to heiress in the space of a morning. It's over, Zeke said. No, it's beginning. Emma ran from the house and threw her arms around Sierra's waist. Angel lady, you don't have to leave. Never again. That afternoon, they sat at the kitchen table with papers spread between them. Legal documents that detailed an inheritance worth more than most towns. Plantations in 3 states. Business investments. Bank accounts that had grown fat while Sierra lived in bondage. You could buy anything, Emma said, studying numbers she couldn't fully comprehend. Already have everything I want. Sierra's eyes met Zeke's across the table. Understanding passed between them that went deeper than wealth or legal freedom. What will you do with it all? Build something better. Schools for children who aren't allowed to learn. Homes for women escaping bondage. Places where people can start over. Justice channeled into hope. Stolen wealth transformed into sanctuary. 6 months later, the ranch had become something new. A way station for travelers seeking refuge. A place where former slaves could rest while journeying toward better lives. Sierra stood in her kitchen wearing proper boots and a wedding dress made from fabric that caught morning light. She moved between stove and table with practiced grace, preparing breakfast for the family that had chosen her. Emma set places for 3. Her laughter filled corners that had been silent for too long. The girl who'd lost her mother had gained something even more precious. A parent who stayed by choice rather than circumstance. Zeke entered with wood for the fire. His eyes found his wife's face and held there, still surprised by the miracle of building love on ground that had seemed too hard for anything beautiful to grow. Morning, Mrs. Thornfield. Morning, husband. The words carried weight of promises kept, of justice earned and love chosen despite every obstacle the world had placed in their path. Outside, autumn painted the mountains in colors that spoke of change and beauty emerging from harsh seasons. Inside, 3 people had built something that would last. Emma finished setting the table and stepped back to admire her work. Perfect family breakfast. Perfect family, Sierra agreed. The kitchen filled with smells of fresh bread and coffee and the particular warmth that came from people who belonged together. What had begun with desperation and a cook-wanted sign had grown into something neither law nor prejudice could destroy. A home built on choice. Love that transcended every boundary society tried to impose. Justice that turned stolen wealth into sanctuary for others still seeking freedom. They sat together as morning light streamed through windows onto faces that had learned to hope again. 3 people who'd found each other in the vast loneliness of the frontier and chosen to stay. Forever. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.